Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome. We are going to have everybody join us and get started in just a minute or two. We're really excited about today that Stephanie Sample is here with us. As you're coming into the chat, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you located? And maybe what's your weather? I'm in Minneapolis and it's going to be hot and humid today, like 96 later today. So I'm in the basement where it's nice and cool. How about you, Stephanie? How's your weather today?
Well, it's Albuquerque, so we're probably going to approach 90 and nice and dry though.
Awesome. Yeah, we got welcome Aurora from Springfield, Missouri and Ohio and Naples, Florida. So Richmond, Virginia, Paige, Tara, look at everybody's just flooding in. This is fabulous. We're going to get started in just a second. Again, introduce yourself. We have a fabulous community here in our chat always on our webinars. And so introduce yourself at 77 and sunny in Grand Rapids. That sounds lovely, actually. Grand Rapids, Michigan. Texas. Many times we have people from all over the world. So I see Canada is represented. Fort Wayne, Indiana, welcome. So we've got a lot of people flooding in. We've got tons of fabulous content today. We're really excited to have Stephanie here. And I know the numbers are just climbing up, but I think in the interest of time, Stephanie, what do you say that I kind of kick this off? You ready?
Sounds great.
Great. Okay, well, welcome to our webinar today. So a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording the session and you will receive the slides and the recording after today's session. So, we'll get that info to you. Also, as we go, so use the chat, which you're all telling us where you're located in your weather. You can use that to support one another in the community. And then for questions for Stephanie, the best thing to do is use the Q&A tab on the Zoom console here. So click that Q&A and type in your question and we'll work to get through those questions. Sometimes we have a lot of questions and can't get through all of them, but we will do our best from that standpoint. So let's move on. So let me tell you a little bit about Bloomerang for a second. We can go ahead and advance the slide one. Just Bloomerang, we're all about the donor creating long-term donor relationships for you. So we have donor relationship management software. That's what we do. Don't go there now. Talk to us after, but we're about making fundraising easier, creating authentic relationships with your donors, and ultimately to help your nonprofit thrive. So that's all I'm going to tell you about. This is a little screenshot of some of the things that you can do with our dashboard and see and how you measure your progress and success, but we'll do that later. Today, we're going to focus on Stephanie. So let me tell you a little bit about Stephanie. I've had the pleasure of getting to know her. Today, we're sharing our love of gardening and other activities. Stephanie is the founder and CEO of Sample Consulting Studio. Stephanie supports many organizations that are leaning into that expansive nature of grant proposal writing and grant making. She has over a decade of international and multicultural studies. All that informs her work and her research that she's doing. Obviously, this is all about fundraising innovation, and Stephanie's grounded in the data and best practices, hands-on, multidisciplinary approach and tools, and thinking about futures. So we are really excited. This has been a long time coming, Stephanie. So big warm welcome, and I will pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm really excited to spend the next 50 or so minutes with you talking about business. It's my absolute favorite topic. And so please, engage. We've got a few polls. We've got questions for you. Use the chat. Contact me. And let me know what ideas from today stick in your brain as we go along. I'm going to be talking about social enterprise, which is really an alternative to this elusive, unrestricted revenue that a lot of organizations look for from funders. So my company is actually rebranded. We're now Fundraising for the Future. You can see our logo down on the bottom. That's a viewfinder for looking ahead. I've been in the nonprofit sector for about 20 years. And here's my contact information. I'm old school. Pick up the phone, call me, send me an email. I'm happy to chat with you. I do have a class coming up through Grant Station. It's called Level Up, and it's September 14th through November 18th, where we're actually going to dig into this topic in more detail. So if what you hear today is interesting to you, it's inspiring, engaging, thought-provoking, or challenging, join us for the Level Up. It's an hour a week for 6 weeks. And fundraising for the future. So with my business, we do grant writing, business and fundraising planning, and social enterprise. We find money for organizations, and specifically social enterprise, I offer it in 2 categories. So one is our road trip category, which is a 2-day social enterprise incubator. And the other one is a 7 to 9 month program called Expedition, where we actually build a business plan from the ground up and help you launch a business that you've been thinking about or incubating, or have some of the groundwork laid for. So without further ado, I know that some folks here have a social enterprise in your organization. Some folks have various degrees of experience with social enterprise. I wanted to do a quick poll if we could, and Sarah's going to handle our poll. Which of the following qualifies as a social enterprise? A nonprofit theater selling tickets, a meal delivery service offering catering, an unrestricted gift to support general operating, a paid course offered by a nonprofit to train community workers first. Take a moment, pick which one you believe qualifies as a social enterprise here, a few examples. And Sarah, if you would just let me know, or Anne, let me know when we reach 50% engagement with the poll, or kind of a group of folks have had a chance to cast their votes.
We're still coming in, so we'll give it a second here. There's a lot of votes still flooding in. Maybe we'll give you like 10 more seconds or so to get your feedback, get your vote in. And I think it's good. Let's go ahead and get your vote in, and we will push out the poll results. There we go.
All right. So it seems like most people picked number 2, which was the meal delivery service. And I would say yes to A, absolutely selling tickets for your shows. That's a social enterprise. It's a revenue stream. Yes to the catering business. No to the unrestricted gift. And yes to the paid course. So seeing here that you can have an enterprise, a revenue stream inside of your organization that already exists, that you're working with, it is unrestricted, right? It's revenue that you say, last year we sold 500 tickets. This is what this revenue stream looked like last year. We're building our budget for next year. We're going to project a similar revenue stream, an increase of 5% or 3%, or however you work your projections. But those are actually social enterprise nuggets inside of your business. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Given that definition that we're working with, it does not have to be a separate business like a classic thrift store, right? Animal humane and then animal humane thrift store. It does not have to be a separate entity. It can be embedded in your business, but it does generate revenue. Who here believes they have a social enterprise in their nonprofit? And who says, we don't have a social enterprise, but I think we'd be a good candidate for one. We have great business sense. We have, cutting edge innovation. We have an idea. Maybe we have a property or another asset that we could leverage to create revenue for our business. So a second here for poll number 2. We have a social enterprise. we don't have one, but we think we'd be a good candidate for one. So take a moment and weigh in if you would. And again, if you just let me know, Anne, when we're
we'll just give it, they're kind of flooding in. Let's give you about 5 to 6 more seconds, and then we'll push it live. Here we go. Get your vote in. Okay, let's go ahead. There we go.
So about 50% have a social enterprise and 50% think you're a good candidate. Well, you're all in the right place. So great. This is going to be a fun conversation today. And I do want to talk to folks who have social enterprises in their organization. And I bet there's a contingent of people who think they would be a good fit for social enterprise, and you actually already have one. The reason that I became interested in social enterprise after working with nonprofits doing fundraising, and when I say fundraising, I mean all of the above: events, annual appeals, grants, federal grants, contracts, major donor fundraising, all of the above, is that there was constantly a need for that unrestricted income. We need to be able to put money where our programs require it, without the constraints of grant reporting, without the constraints of whether or not people believe the program needs to grow, and raising your budget every single year, starting from the ground up. If you're $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, even $300,000, can be burdensome. It can be very, very difficult. With social enterprise, you have a revenue stream that you do not have to ask for every year. You don't have to go out and solicit. You cultivate a revenue stream, and it comes back. It's renewable. By nature, it's unrestricted. And this is a fundamental shift in the way we as nonprofits think about our budgets. We think about our budgets as we ask people for the operating budgets we need to execute our programs. But wow, there really, really is a different way. I have seen hundreds of nonprofit budgets, and I'm sure folks who've looked at them too, there's rarely a surplus. Sometimes it is 50 cents of a surplus over expenses. Sometimes it's $100 or $200. But there's this thinking that we have in the nonprofit sector of, if we are profitable, if we have a large profit margin, we're not going to be regarded as a viable nonprofit. Maybe people think they're going to lose their charitable status. They think they're going to lose their donors if they have a profit in their budget. And as a result, there are these internal obstacles to passing a budget with a surplus. And the organizations that I work with, some of them really are moving past internal obstacles to growth. This idea that we can't have revenue that exceeds our expenses, it's dangerous for us. And I will say, I was just in Charleston, South Carolina, teaching at the Southern Grants Forum. I spoke a little bit about social enterprise, and a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, "No one told me that I can earn my own money as a nonprofit. No one told me that. I wish someone had told me I could earn my own money." And she had tears in her eyes. It was very emotional, because the stress of raising your entire organizational budget every year can really wear staff down. It can contribute to burnout. So I like to use this analogy. Anne mentioned gardening. I am a gardener. I have a green thumb. I like to envision it as perennials versus annuals. There's a garden plot in front of my house, and every year when I think about what I'm going to put in it, I plan around the perennials, the plants that will grow back year after year, and they'll grow perhaps a little bit bigger as they expand and mature. And so I'll plant, my annuals, the ones I know I'm going to have to replace, and I'll count on the plants that are going to grow back, larger, slightly more mature, to fill up that garden plot. And so fundraising for your organization, I think about it as filling in your garden plot, filling in your budget with different, different buckets, different sections of revenue. And your social enterprise revenue, that earned income, is going to be that grow back plant, that grow back stream. It's a different way of thinking about it. It's certainly has the potential to relieve some of the burden on your staff, and to give you the freedom to move cash where it needs to be allocated. So the first thing I like to talk about is, is your organization ready for social enterprise? And sometimes there will be this cart before the horse, an idea like, food truck or a stand at a farmer's market, or a product that is put out at a convention, and it's not fully built out as a business plan. So I like to ask people where they're at to determine whether or not the timing is right. So this is your soil, is your, soil composition before we start planting. What is the soil like? Do you have up-to-date financials? Do you have up-to-date audits? Do you have a harmonious board and executive director relationship? To incubate a business or to grow a revenue stream can be controversial. So depending on how your leadership views it, do they view it as the right step? Or do you have people in two camps? Some folks who don't want to generate a revenue and some folks who do. Are you fully staffed and programs are running smoothly? Or do you have a vision for how you're going to fund your business? So these are some things to consider when you're looking at starting a social enterprise in your business. It's a little bit different for startup nonprofits. So if you're at the very beginning of your journey, you're in your first, I'd say 3 years, there can be an opportunity to design your social enterprise from the ground floor. And you say, you know what, we're going to start with a fee for service or a fee for product. We're going to start with a sliding scale fee structure, or maybe it's a membership fee structure. I was just chatting with an organization a couple of weeks ago, and the pandemic really walloped them. It did. And they're a membership organization. Guess what's remaining out of their revenue? Their membership dues. And those membership dues are something that can be calculated. They calculate retention, they calculate new growth, they calculate increases in their membership dues. And thank goodness that they have that base of social enterprise revenue from their membership so that they can move forward with their operations. And I have a bullet point here that says check the discount mentality, because again, to this idea of being comfortable with a profit in our nonprofit sector, in our businesses, there's often this sense that we need to reduce the bottom line for folks. We can't actually charge full price. We can't actually communicate how much it costs to provide our services, or we'll scare people away. And I really encourage nonprofits to check that out. And if you are discounting your bottom line, I've seen a discount line on a grant application. It costs us this much to provide services. If you fund us, we'll give you a discount of 10% to run the program. Check that at the door, because no one's asking for it, so you don't need to give it. So again, it's this shift between nonprofit language, marketing, business plan versus fundraising plan, revenue versus income, and really moving towards an idea that as organizations, we are allowed to earn. We are allowed to earn. And until leadership gets on that page, social enterprise is not going to move forward. There's going to be a foot on the gas and a foot on the brake at the same time. So, language is culture. Ask yourselves, and, I would be curious, are you conditioned to pass a budget with a minimal profit? Or perhaps some people have deficit budgets. What would your leadership do if you had a moderate surplus or a large surplus? And moving into that space of we are ready to grow, we are ready to grow our own income is going to set the groundwork for your social enterprise. Again, you know, a lot of cultural entrenchment in the nonprofit sector around having control over the revenue as opposed to giving donors control. Will we confuse our donors? If we start earning a profit, are people going to think we're not doing our work anymore? Will our program staff be confused about who we are? Are we going to be sending mixed messages that, you know, this revenue stream is more important than our program work? Or number three, and I would say this is the number one speed bump to organizations starting to look more closely at their revenue streams and how to grow them, is who's going to run the business, who's going to take control over seeing this profit come through. We're already busy. Everyone has their own jobs. So the staffing piece can be controlled. It can be designed to work within your current resources. You know, there's a lot of talk these days about B jobs and side hustles and things you can do with the time you have to earn more money. And so translating that concept to your organization, if you have, you know, 10 hours a week in your organization, you say, we have got 10 hours a week to allocate to running this business. And we can invest 20 grand in seed money. And maybe it's 200 grand. You know, maybe you received Mackenzie Scott money, you received a bequest, a legacy gift, you know, you have an influx of cash that you want to plant so that it will seed itself in the future. It will generate more income. All right. Design the business around the resources you have, both staff resources, time resources, cash resources for startup. So, you know, it can be done. It can be done, and it can be scaled based on capacity. Really important, because I know that being under the hood of a variety of organizations and seeing staffing, you know, across the board understaffed. Across the board, we're understaffed. So most people start with this, what is our business going to be? Because that's exciting. That's really exciting. That's the brainstorming space of, you know, perhaps we'll do, you know, youth workers running a compost business. Perhaps we'll do something food related, perhaps, but I suggest rewinding it a little bit and saying, are we ready? And what are our assets? What do we have? We're going to move into that space. What do we do? The asset inventory. So grab a pen, piece of paper. We're going to do a little bit of writing, and I want you to use this space. If you're multitasking, welcome to the club. I'm a big multitasker. I know that it's an attention economy, and oftentimes we're, you know, listening to a webinar and checking email, listening to a webinar and driving. But if you can actually take a pen, take a piece of paper, and take a moment here. So what would you accomplish with unrestricted revenue as a result of your social enterprise? What would you do with the money? And I'd say for playing around, for this idea space, pick, 20% of your annual operating budget. If you received a windfall of 20%, or if you had an additional revenue stream that was 20%, what would you do with it? How would you grow? Where would you put it? I will say, put this question to your board and see, give folks index cards, old school, have them write it down and see how much harmony there is around the table, your senior leadership team, for how unrestricted revenue would be applied. And that will tell you a lot about what page you're on, and consensus. So, one thing you would accomplish with unrestricted revenue, write it down, your top need.
Stephanie, while you're having everyone kind of write this down, there's a couple questions coming in just around like this is a interesting concept. So like, can you give some examples or provide a very simple definition of social enterprise and maybe some examples? Like there was a question around, is Habitat for Humanity the Restore? Is that sells donated items to help pay operating expenses? Is that? So I think everyone's trying to, a couple of listeners are still trying to get their head around what social enterprise is.
Sure. So that's going back to the poll we did at the very beginning, a nonprofit that sells tickets to their theater, that's a social enterprise. It's a revenue stream that's embedded within the organization. Very, very common to have business as a part of your organization. So fee for service, fee for product, that's social enterprise. It's the opposite of donations, gifts that people give you with no goods or services attached. Restore is a great example. Goodwill is a great example. Your animal humane thrift stores, great example. Those are classic social enterprise models for nonprofits. For example, I'm thinking of the Albuquerque Art Museum. They have a gift store. Their gift store is a social enterprise. The museum is a nonprofit, but their gift store has a budget, and they sell items, they sell materials, they sell classes, and that is a generated revenue stream. Again, product for cash. Do you think that clarifies a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. So maybe some of our listeners that were asking the questions just either chat into the hosts and panelists if that helps, or if they're still, yes, thank you for the clarification. So yeah, some people will refer to it, Terry, great comment, of refer to the same thing as earned revenue. So everyone's giving a thumbs up. So that was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sure. And I will say, I feel like my experience is that organizations have businesses and business activities that are earned income, and they don't view them as a business. That's very, very common. It's a way of shifting our thinking about what we do. So, and we'll look at that a little bit more as we go on. Thanks for pausing, and I appreciate hearing the feedback. I'm not keeping an eyeball on the chat, so if something comes through that you feel like is relevant, just stop me, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, just one really quick clarification that like Habitat for Humanity's Restore is an example of social enterprise.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Absolutely. So your mission goals, what would you accomplish? Your financial goals, how much net revenue is needed to accomplish your mission goal, and by when? And, powerful enterprises have clear goals. This is where I truly believe that opportunity favors the prepared. And if you, in your organization, you say, we need X amount of dollars to do X, we need $300,000 to purchase the adjacent lot next to our building so that we can expand our footprint for services. That kind of clarity is going to eliminate or reduce confusion that the community may have around your business. If you're starting a business, or if you're beefing up a revenue stream, and people ask why, what for? Everyone can tell the story of $300,000, our adjacent lot, expanding services. So that, 1 + 1 + 2 = 2, getting that clarity to share is so valuable in your social enterprise journey. And the place that we start, and I mentioned this earlier, in looking for, the term low-hanging fruit comes to mind, but there are assets that you have, what you do, what you have, and who you know. That's a place that I always start with organizations who are interested in growing enterprises, because there's this area of expertise, of asset that often goes unrecognized. So, an example, an organization who I was running a workshop with, we did an asset inventory, and we spent some time going through what they do, what they know, what they have, and who they know, their relationship assets. And when we got to what they have, they started inventorying physical assets. And we came into a conversation about this soda water cart, a portable soda water cart that the organization had. And they brought it to all of their events, which were sports, health and wellness related events. And they said every single event, they set up the cart, there was immediately a line, and they would run out of water, without fail within 2 hours. They would give away these flavored sparkly waters, and it was just a big crowd pleaser. And as we were chatting, I said, well, great, how much do you sell the waters for? And they said, oh, we don't sell them, we give them away. Perfect example there of an asset that they have. They know the community loves it, they know it's popular, and with a micro shift, and I didn't do the math on the spot, but you can imagine, a market rate for a bubbly water, $5. With inflation, we might be at $7. Multiply that by the number of people, by the number of events, and you have a potential revenue stream there. So thinking about your assets in a different light can open doors to business ideas. And oftentimes it's hard for us as organizations to see what our assets are. Perhaps it's a piece of equipment that you have that you use approximately 2 times a year that could be rented out. It could be used as a source of income for your organization when it's not in use by you. And so this is where I just like to encourage people to own your brilliance, what you know, what you have, what you do. It is special. It is brilliant. It is something that can be leveraged for unrestricted revenue for your organization. So 3 ways your organization is brilliant. And I put 3 ways you are brilliant, because, we can play with this on different levels. And I like to in my house, and you should see them with the color wheel. It is amazing. So that is, that's something that they get asked for a lot, and it's a potential place where, who knows, they may be able to, they may be able to generate revenue. How are we doing on my video?
We turned it off because it was starting to break up. So it's just getting a little spotty. So,
okay, sorry to hear that. I did want to hear from any attendees, anyone in the, in the chat, about ideas that are sticking with you, something that's standing out as a concept you'd like to explore further. So I wanted to take a little break here for participation.
Well, Jennifer has a great question around, is it common / okay to have more than one social enterprise?
Absolutely. Great question. And I'll give a couple of examples later on, but often when a nonprofit ventures into the business world, the first enterprise is the hardest. Like they say, you know, making your first million is the hardest. I've seen organizations who move into the social enterprise space. And once they get there and start getting that unrestricted revenue, it's like, all right, we're focusing on this. We're going to, create another spinoff. So I'd say, the learning curve is pretty steep. So if you are actually already in the process of going through the learning curve and you've hit, the major change point and you've got some fluency under your belt, very common to create another enterprise. There's that experience, there's the knowledge base, and especially on the leadership level, there are the numbers. You can say, we invested X amount, it returned X amount, and the numbers speak for themselves. So
well, I think one comment, if you could flip back one slide so they could jot down, you will get the recording and the slides afterwards, but I think it was just kind of posing some questions. Some other, kind of a big question, and maybe you're going to answer it later, but how do you keep your nonprofit 501c3 status if you're making revenue, right? How kind of separate that out?
Sure. So I'll say two things about that. One, and I love that nonprofits are really concerned about this. I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a CPA. I don't know the IRS code inside and out. There is unrelated business income tax. You would have to earn substantially, substantially more than you receive in donations to be hitting that unrelated business income tax mark. I think that there are a lot of ins and outs about whether or not the revenue is mission related. And if it's mission related, there are different allowances than if it's not mission related. But can you imagine? That's a great problem to have. We're earning so much money that we might lose our nonprofit revenue status. A lot of solutions, right? You can spin off an LLC, you can start another business, you can restructure, but it's not something to prevent you from getting onto the starting line with social enterprise. If you earn 5% of your operating budget or 7% or 8% or 10%, you're not going to lose your status. And that's something that we just don't think about. There's a false mentality that as nonprofits, we're prohibited legally from earning money. And it's, that's not the reality. It's just not. So, I'm not going to go into the tax side of things today, or ever in my presentations, but I do know that from working with multiple organizations that have healthy revenue streams from their social enterprises, that there are lots of ways to move the ball forward without being, in danger of losing your status.
That's great. I mean, it's really expanding your thinking. So a couple more, you were asking about examples. So Vincent shared, how about an online store with branded products or related affiliate products, right? To their mission. So if they're selling t-shirts, is that considered social enterprise or unrestricted revenue?
Yes.
Okay. And then thinking about another one here was, hey, we do a lot of festivals and we have this primo parking lot right next to where we have all these festivals and concerts. If we charge for parking in that lot, could that be considered social enterprise?
Yes.
Yep. And then I'm curious, so it's like, have you come across any suggestions around a mental health organization having a social enterprise? Maybe some examples from that perspective.
Yeah, and I'd like to move through into the kind of example portion. And I think that's going to help kind of build some stories in people's brains. One idea that I want to throw out to the group is, we're going to see a lot of business transfer in our community as the baby boomers get older. There's a lot of data about that. And I want to spend a second about talking about business transfer. I would encourage you to talk to business owners in your community about social enterprise. So these kind of, does this count? Could we build it this way? Would this be viable? Have those conversations with business owners. Here are 3 examples of organizations that I chatted with in my daily life. And, this was in the span of a week, talking to people about how they bought their business, what their succession plan is, how they're going to handle the transfer of their business. So I mentioned earlier that, there's the learning curve for starting your social enterprise. There's an organization in Taos that they started a social enterprise. They were actually on the first slide of the presentation. You see, 2 people leaning over this purple light and some sprouts growing. They started a organic farm to source herbs to local restaurants. That was a ground up enterprise that they started. And then they purchased an ice cream, frozen yogurt shop from a retiring owner. And that's Ziggy's, you'll see here. And so, I talked to the CEO and she said, wow, purchasing a business was so much easier than starting a business. And, that is something that I just want to put out there because, we have 70 million boomers that are going to be making an impact on the economy. They are going to be selling or bequeathing their assets. And if you're in a nonprofit and you're dealing with legacy pieces, chances are you've begun to see this trickle. But 70% of 12 million businesses are going to be changing hands. That's incredible. And it's happening in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So I just want to introduce that idea here because as we're talking about social enterprise, there's a chance that in the years, 2022 to 2042, you're going to get donations of businesses. You're going to get someone who wants to transition and they don't know how. And so if you are a forward-thinking organization, if you feel like, you're business-minded, you have folks on the leadership team that are thinking ahead, put this in the pot, stir it around. Will a boomer board member bequeath you a business? Will a boomer donor bequeath you a business? Are they going to perhaps just give you materials from their business? Maybe you have a print shop that's closing down. The boomer is a huge fan of your nonprofit. They don't have a succession plan in place. And through relationship, you learn that they would be willing to donate all of the equipment. All right, there is your startup material for your business. You're going to lower your overhead. You're going to build relationship with that boomer, their family, maybe their clientele. And so this idea of how social enterprise and nonprofits is going to be informed by the boomer transition and the wealth transfer is really, really interesting. You're not going to see all of the businesses change hands. Some of them are going to disappear, but some of them are going to be snatched up by other entrepreneurs. And how come those entrepreneurs can't be in the nonprofit sector? They can. It could be your organization. And like I said, with Dreamtree and Taos, they started one from the ground up and then they bought one and they turned a profit on their, on that business in year 1. So it's just an idea that I wanted to take time to float because I think it's, it's different and it's something to consider. So, Anne, any comments or anything you want to bring up before we move on into the next little portion?
Well, there's lots of great questions coming in here too. Just a fun fact that the millennials and younger generations over the next, like you were saying, 10 years stand to inherit about $73 trillion. There's, like you said, there's a lot that's going to be changing hands and there's a real opportunity for how we tap into that. Kind of along the lines of profitability with a social enterprise. Can you touch on like, how do you make it profitable? I mean, I think you hit on some great points of just getting started, but any tips or tricks around making it profitable?
Sure. Well, if you want to talk about making your business profitable, send me an email. I love designing a budget for profitability. And I say design because it has to be the first thing in your mind when you're designing your budget. And that is, it's a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science. I have some formulas that I use, just to be totally blunt. When I'm designing budgets for my clients and I'm designing my own budget for the organization, I'm nerdy about that. I love my business plan. I actually generally have 4 business plans, and it's like, a growth business plan, an extreme growth business plan. But I do think it's in the design. Profit is not something that's whimsical or, leave it up to chance. It's something that either is in the forefront of people's minds when they're building a budget, or it's not something that's considered. So that's kind of general, but without more information, I think, that design piece is really, really important. And I do know that, here we're talking about budgeting, that what is going to return, that if you plant those perennial plants, if you have those revenue streams and you pay attention to them, that they will get larger and you can design them to get larger. So the way to build in that profitability into your design is really to give yourself permission in areas where you're not considering profit. So that looks like charging more for services that you provide and you aren't charging for. Without fail, when I get under the hood of nonprofits and I start picking up, things and saying, like the soda water cart is a perfect example. There are services that are being provided that, aren't being charged for. Charge more for services that you already provide. Sometimes we get nonprofits that actually aren't even charging enough to cover the expenses for the services that they're providing. So, again, reeling it back in from this, we have to start this external business to be profitable, to these budgeting practices with profitability in mind that can change, how much revenue you earn. And I like to set goals. I'm very, very attached to goals and plans. So setting an earned income goal. So if you have a museum shop, if you have a t-shirt shop, if you have an event and every time you host the, marathon or the walkathon, all of your t-shirts sell out because you have the best t-shirts and posters, or you have a website and everyone always goes to this one page because it's a resource page and it's the best in the community. Consider building a plan for that enterprise, for that part of the organization that's earning. And when I say build a plan, it does not have to be 75 pages. It does not have to be in a fancy template. It can be in an Excel document or a Word document, but it has to have clear goals. A couple of examples, a domestic violence organization that I worked with, they were sending an advocate into the field and doing 200 trainings a year for free. They were doing a bunch of corporate trainings, charging nothing for them. And we started talking about what it would look like if they had an honorarium that they charged $500 for each training. It would add $100,000 to their bottom line. So looking at these small changes that you can make to increase the profitability of your budget, dropping the discount for returning members, these places where the mentality of we give it away trumps sustainability and profitability as an organization, because that ultimately impacts your mission, your programs, and how you're going to be able to fare in a crisis. What I like to say is find a nonprofit who's comfortable with making a profit and pay attention to how they operate their business. Start a conversation, take notes. So in my community, I would go to Animal Humane New Mexico. I would go and talk to their executive director because they just bought an adjacent lot, and Animal Humane, instead of building a thrift store or these kind of classic models, they started a doggy daycare. They started a boarding facility, and they built it from the ground up. It is one of the top rated boarding facilities in Albuquerque. It's a social enterprise that feeds back into the nonprofit. And I would just pick their brain. How does it happen? So starting to have those conversations, you're going to get ideas. And I did want to talk a little bit about what's happening nationally in the US before we wrap here. There's, a movement happening with United Methodist Churches in the Carolinas. They own 2,400 parcels of real estate as a nonprofit organization. And they did a poll and they realized that, the average church usage was 12 to 14% of the time. So you have these 2,400 parcels of real estate that are being used less than a quarter of the time. And they really engage this organization called the Wesley Community Development Corporation, WCDC, to help transform their assets into enterprises. So building townhomes on church property, building senior housing, renovating classrooms, renting the space to small business owners in town who did counseling, music lessons, taekwondo. This is something that's happening and it's unfolding in the Carolinas right now. It's really wild to look at the repurposing of assets that is happening there. So I wanted to throw that out there as a case study, something to, again, peek under the hood of, to get your juices flowing, to think creatively about how you might move in business. And perhaps you have, assets that are physical, you have buildings, you have land, who decides how it's being used? Are there needs in the community near your property? Could you use your assets in different ways? Looking at that case study and just drawing a little bit of inspiration from that shift from, all right, 12% of the time, our asset is being used 12% of the time. Certainly we can maximize the rest of the time somehow, not just to earn an income, but to really serve our community better. So I'll stop there. I'm guessing we might have a few more comments in the chat, ideas, things that you want to bounce off before we wrap up today.
Definitely. Lots of great questions. So Casey was asking, just like, it's the concept of just getting started. So how do you balance creating a new social enterprise or a revenue stream with the expenses? And then, the staff piece, right? So it's kind of the getting started, right? And then I've got a staff that's already stretched thin. How do you take on a new enterprise? Like, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're already stretched thin, I would recommend this perennial budgeting technique. So instead of starting a new enterprise, I would say, let's incubate, let's sit down and look at 5 areas where you're already operating in a space, and we can leverage your existing services or products to try and generate more income. So the examples like the DV organization that's doing all of this training and not charging for it, I would say instead of starting something new, if you're having that squeeze on staff, looking at perennial budgeting first so that we can increase revenue and potentially grow the team prior to, engaging social enterprise on a larger scale. That would be my recommendation.
That's great. So curious, one question just on an example, is so tuition for courses in a nonprofit school considered a social enterprise?
Yes, tuition is a great example. That's
Okay.
your intellectual property. That's what we talked about assets, what you do, what you have, what who So the training, if you offer trainings, that's what that's one of the key assets that people leverage for social enterprise.
Yeah. Brian is asking about how do you improve social enterprise that is based on a sliding fee scale, being an organization that's making arts affordable and the majority of the clients are low income? So have you come across any examples where you've got, this fee for service, but you do a sliding scale because maybe you're in a predominantly low income area?
Absolutely. Actually, one of my longstanding clients has a sliding fee scale. And I think there are a lot of elements to sliding fee. There's a lot of nuance. Sometimes it has to do with evening it out. There may be larger subsidies on the lower end and very little subsidies in the middle. Sometimes it has to do with true cost. I've seen organizations that do sliding scale have trouble actually building the entire true cost into the sliding fee scale because they don't want to put the responsibility on some individuals and not others. But I mean, sliding fee it's a very complex, it's a complex situation. I mean, that's not really, I'd have to learn more for sure. I'd have to learn more, and I'm open to that conversation. But perfect example of an enterprise where, if it's not if you're in the red on your sliding scale or you're just breaking even, there's definitely things that we can do to help make a profit.
I think we've got time. Here's a question from Aaron about just kind of the perception of our corporate. Have you seen our corporate donors less likely to fund you when you're running a social enterprise? Do they seem like, hey, you're bringing in all this revenue, you don't really need our funding? How do you balance that?
I mean, it's so interesting because it's a common misconception. And I would say if social enterprise to me equals sustainability, and it also equals taking control of your destiny as an organization. And if there's a funder that says, if you're earning your own money, we're not going to give you money, I would just ask some questions. That's like telling a business, if your corporate earnings are high, we're going to go somewhere else where their corporate earnings are low. And I feel like it's often a skewed perspective of our funders, that funders will, jump to conclusions. But again, that's where I said, having a clear picture of, we want to earn $300,000 to buy the adjacent lot so that we can expand services. If you say that to any corporate business person, you're not just starting a business for the fun of it. You're starting it to earn money so that you can advance your programs. So if you have that really clear messaging and every funder who asks gets the same answer, then when they talk to each other and say, oh my gosh, did you hear that? Like they're starting an organic farm and they're going to be selling produce, but they're doing that so that they can do job training for young people and they want to expand their campus. That's the second piece of it. The why. Why are you earning? What is it? Are you offsetting a funder that's leaving? They understand that too. We lost a $500,000 contract. It was destabilizing. We don't want to be in a position where we're destabilized when we lose a major funder. We want more, more sustainability.
I think that's a great point. So I sit on a committee that issues grants. So we review the applications. It's one thing that we look at is what are there other sources, especially when they're asking for a multi-year, grant. And then, we want to look at like, what's the feasibility that they could actually get this project done that they're asking for, $50,000 every year for the next 4 years. I would love to do that, but how do I know that they're going to be able to use that money? And so that's where I think there's that misnomer of thinking that someone won't give me money because it actually probably will help because I know you're going to be around. So therefore we want to continue to invest. It actually, I think, from issuing, granting money to those, it helps.
100%.
Well, this has been fabulous. There are lots of other questions. We'll get those questions over to you, Stephanie. And you've all been absolutely wonderful with your contributions and just sharing and helping each other out. This was a lot of fun today to kind of expand our horizons, right? As we think about what, how do we create some, additional sustainable funding or resources into our organization. So if you'd like more info and you want to connect with Stephanie, raise your hand. Or if you want to learn a little bit about Bloomerang and how you cultivate donor relationships and spend less time in all those systems and more time fundraising and thinking up your social enterprise, let's talk. And then save the date. Actually, we've got double duty this week. We've got another webinar on Thursday. On the next slide, we've got Carol Hamilton talking about, just thinking about planning. So making online strategic planning fun. So register for that if that's something of interest to you. But most importantly, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today and your insights and just all your recommendations and ideas. I think this was really, really mind-opening, I'll say. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who wants to chat more.
Great. And to everybody out there, thank you again so much for your participation. We hope that you have the rest of your day goes well, that you are inspired, and that you stay safe. Take care, everybody.